The story began at the music bureau in Jingyang County, during the 10th year of Zhengguan. Outside a brothel, a hand with red nails rests lazily on the doorframe, and soon a curvy young woman shows up. She teases the young man outside, telling him not to rush and invites him in, saying she'll make tea and get everything ready. The man doesn't look too happy but still follows her into the room. A little later, the girl starts acting strange, sweating and twisting on the bed, saying she feels overheated and asks him to check. The young man calmly walks over, face completely blank. He places his hand near her neck, making her let out a comfortable sound, and right when she's asking for mercy, he suddenly tightens his grip. Her eyes widen, and strange energy starts leaking out of her body. Turns out, the guy is using Taoist techniques to suppress her hidden power. With a glowing talisman in his hand, his eyes shine brightly as he forces her to show her true form. Then the scene changes when we officially meet our main character. His name is Shinchang. He explains that he grew up in modern times, under a scientific, materialist upbringing, but somehow ended up in this ancient Tang dynasty society. And not in a good way either. He didn't become a prince, a noble, or even someone rich. He didn't get a cheat system either. He's just an ordinary guy trying to get by. To survive, he worked hard and managed to rent a super cheap 6-room house. But as soon as he gets there, he realizes he's been tricked. Frustrated, he rips up the contract papers, cursing how sneaky the brokers of the Tang dynasty are. Still, this rundown little house becomes the first step of his legendary life here. Walking inside, he sees talismans pasted all over the doors and sighs. The money's gone, nothing to do now. A gust of wind blows, peeling off some of the talismans. He shakes his head, complaining that this dirty little place doesn't even have cleaning services and yet has random things stuck everywhere. In the courtyard, there's a rusty iron sword stuck inside a strange yin-yang formation. Looking up, he notices cobwebs hanging from the ceiling, tangled with even more talismans. He stares at the sword and thinks to himself, no matter how smart he thought he was coming from modern times, dealing with these ancient tricks still leaves him feeling one step behind. With a sigh, he pulls out a cigarette, lights it, and takes a puff to calm down. As the smoke drifts upward, something surprising happens. The dead tree nearby suddenly sprouts fresh green buds. Then a sudden glint catches his eye. Curious, he walks over and sees what looks like an old sword. Thinking it's just scrap metal left lying around, he picks it up for a closer look. But the moment he touches it, the hilt snaps right off. Shinchang freezes, staring at the broken piece in his hand, muttering that now it's useless. He was hoping to at least use it for cutting grass or tilling the soil. Just then, a voice suddenly calls out from inside the house, making Shinchang jump in surprise. Someone inside is calling for help. He quickly tosses away his cigarette and frowns, thinking, wait a minute, didn't the broker say this place has been empty for ages? So why is someone here? Annoyed, he storms toward the room, shouting for whoever's inside to come out. But as he steps on the 8 trigrams formation, his footprint lights up in golden glow. He pushes the door open angrily, claiming that this is his house now and no one else should be inside. The moment the door opens, what he sees leaves him stunned. First, a pair of huge jade rabbits, then a young woman appears. She's beautiful, seductive, and keeps calling him young master in a sweet, soft voice. Shinchang's face turns red as he mutters to himself that he might have just fallen in love. But when the girl suddenly throws herself at him, he dodges out of the way, making her crash onto the floor. Instead of helping her up, he tries to act tough, saying she can't just touch him whenever she feels like it. The girl doesn't give up though. She grabs his belt and clings onto him, teasing that people in the Tang dynasty should learn to work hard instead of being lazy. She even presses against his back, whispering that she always relies on her own 2 hands to make a living. At this point, Shinchang feels an unexpected pressure on his waist and freaks out. Panicking, he cries out, calling her a female pervert, and quickly backs away, hugging himself for protection. Flustered, he insists she's definitely up to something, but he has no proof. Before he can calm down, the girl's body suddenly starts glowing with a strange aura. But Shinchang doesn't notice at all. Instead, he just keeps lecturing her, telling her it's late, she should go home, and that hanging around abandoned houses is dangerous because she might get stuck inside with no one to help. He even peels a talisman off the wall and warns her, saying he's heard rumors that this place might be haunted. The girl quietly asks if he's afraid of ghosts. Shinchang bursts out laughing and brags that he's a chosen time traveler, someone blessed by fate, immune to ghosts and spirits. Right at that moment, the painting on the wall comes alive. The celestial general's eyes move, glaring straight at him. Behind him, the girl finally reveals her real form, but he's still totally clueless, casually explaining that ghosts and monsters are just old superstitions made up to scare people. From outside, the whole house is now covered in a heavy, eerie aura. Somewhere far away, another figure suddenly appears. A high-ranking official bows to him respectfully, introducing himself as the city god of Jingyang County. He explains that 9 dangerous spirits are trying to merge together, and while their power is rising fast, he can only seal them temporarily. He apologizes for the trouble. But then, this man realizes something terrible. His ceiling formation has already been broken. Meanwhile, Shen Changqing is still inside, completely unaware of the danger right behind him. Instead, his eyes are glued to the shining gold coins under the table, sparkling like treasure. His face lights up like he just struck it rich. The female ghost creeps up from behind, ready to pounce, but Shen Changqing suddenly flips the table, making her slam right into it. He doesn't even notice, his full attention is on the shiny gold coins scattered on the ground. Laughing happily, he stuffs them into his pocket, already daydreaming about eating 2 extra meat buns the next morning. But then something strange happens. The coins in his pocket start glowing brightly. Shen Changqing freezes, shocked, wondering how his money suddenly vanished into thin air. Before he can react, the coins float out by themselves and form a strange space. That's when it hits him. This is a system, the ultimate cheat tool of a time traveler. Excited, he strikes a dramatic pose with a rose in his mouth, ready to explore its functions. But when the system panel pops up, his smile disappears. It says he only has about 72 hours of energy left, and unless he recharges, the system will erase him. It even tries to tempt him with a first recharge bonus, offering gold. Furious, Shen Changqing curses at it, calling it a scam, and angrily smashes the panel. Right then, the female ghost tries to act sweet again, saying she'll keep him company for the night. But instead of romance, she gets a heavy strike to the face. To his surprise, she doesn't get upset, she blushes, trembles, and clings to his arm with a shy look. Shen Changqing stares wide-eyed, completely confused, wondering why she's still here. The ghost suddenly collapses onto him, leaning against his chest, whispering that just touching him feels strange. Shen Changqing's face turns red, and embarrassed, he quickly tells her they should stop here and maybe meet again later. Before he can escape the awkward moment, the Taoist priest and the county official burst in, shouting, "Demon!" Shen Changqing freezes in shock while the ghost continues holding on to him. Both newcomers stand there speechless for a good few seconds, totally dumbfounded by what they're seeing. Finally, they point at the scene and ask each other if this is really the so-called dangerous spirit. They warn the ghost to release Shen Changqing, claiming she's using tricks to drain his energy. Hearing this, Shen Changqing panics, sweating nervously. He insists she was the one who started everything and it has nothing to do with him. In his head though, he starts imagining a flipped scenario, where the ghost is the victim, the Taoist and judge are the villains, and he's the poor innocent one caught in the middle. Determined to clear his name, Shen Changqing pushes the ghost away and tells them not to scold him unfairly. Looking frustrated, he lights a cigarette to calm down and mutters that he thought she was just some lost girl or someone who took the wrong turn. Turns out she's actually a runaway spirit trying to swindle his money. Outwardly he acts confident, but deep inside he's crying, because truthfully, he doesn't even have money to be scammed. Whatever little he had has already been eaten up by the system. The Taoist priest and the martial judge exchange suspicious looks after watching Shen Changqing. They whisper to themselves, how could this ordinary mortal push back that powerful ghost aura so easily, when even their formations failed? The martial judge steps forward, puffing himself up, and scolds Shen Changqing for being disrespectful to him, the mighty city god. But Shen Changqing doesn't buy it. Annoyed, he literally kicks the 2 strange men out of his house. He mocks their flashy clothes, calling them scammers, and even brags that if they're claiming to be the city god, then he's the Jade Emperor himself. To make things worse, he tosses the female ghost at them too and slams the door shut, shouting for everyone to leave him alone. Outside, the 2 men and the ghost stare at each other in shock. They suddenly realize that since stepping into his courtyard, none of their powers have been working. They start wondering if Shen Changqing is actually some hidden immortal. The martial judge looks down at the ghost and notices her aura has grown even darker. Nervously, he asks the Taoist how to deal with her. The Taoist priest panics and immediately runs away, saying he needs to get help from his master. The martial judge yells after him, begging not to be left alone, but it's too late. When he turns back, the ghost has transformed into an old, terrifying-looking woman. His frightened scream echoes through the night. Meanwhile, outside Shen Changqing's courtyard, a group of wandering souls appears. They sniff the air hungrily, talking about how intoxicating his scent is and how badly they want to consume it. They're convinced that his body belongs to them. From the mist, a delicate white foot steps forward, followed by a soft, furry tail. Soon, an incredibly beautiful young woman appears. With her perfect figure and dreamy eyes, she smirks seductively, saying it's no wonder demons from miles away are drawn here. She explains that even ordinary spirits could ascend instantly if they consumed his essence, and if she herself absorbed it, she could probably reach immortality on the spot. She pushes open the courtyard door, the wooden creak echoing sharply. The sound makes Shen Changqing clutch his head in pain, grinding his teeth. Finally, he bursts out of the door, furious, shouting at the top of his lungs that people should have some decency. It's the middle of the night and he just wants to rest. The moment he shouts, golden light suddenly radiates from his body, blasting away the fox spirit and the wandering souls. The fox spirit is thrown back into her original form and faints outside the courtyard. Later, at Ziku Mansion, the fox spirit slowly wakes up, realizing she was unconscious for hours. As she's still confused, shadows gather around her, forming into a vengeful female demon surrounded by thick, eerie energy. The demon condenses a ball of dark power in her palm, glaring with soulless eyes. The little fox spirit is so terrified her tail stands straight up. She cries out for help, trembling on the ground, unable to even stand properly. She realizes her magical powers are gone and curses, saying that golden light from last night really messed her up. The little fox spirit stares in horror as the demon approaches, its whole body wrapped in twisted faces made of dark energy. She panics, thinking her end has come. Just then, Shen Changqing casually opens his door and steps out, stretching. He greets the day cheerfully, even though it's still pitch black outside, and yawns, wondering if he woke up too early. Seeing him, the fox spirit immediately dashes toward him for help, only for Shen Changqing to unknowingly shut the door right in her face. She freezes on the spot, dumbfounded. Behind her, the demon creeps closer, whispering mockingly into her ear, calling her a lost little creature. The fox spirit is too scared to even reply. The demon laughs cruelly and declares it has caught a tasty snack. Terrified, the fox spirit screams in her heart that she's doomed, over and over again. But at that exact moment, Shen Changqing comes back out, golden light bursting from his body and scattering the dark energy all around. With a basket slung over his shoulder, he mutters to himself about having to head out early. He grumbles about the system draining both his money and his life, sighing at his bad luck. As he steps forward, his foot accidentally lands right on the fox spirit's tail. She yelps in pain and angrily protests, calling him the real mutt. Shen Changqing crouches down to take a closer look, scratching his head. He apologizes, asking whose dog spirit she is and why she's hanging around his doorstep. Then, with a mischievous grin, he reaches out to touch her fur. The fox spirit wants to shout that he's a shameless pervert, but stuck in animal form, she can't say a word. As his hand strokes her silky fur, she suddenly feels waves of spiritual energy pouring into her body. Shocked, she widens her eyes, wondering how his touch could carry such incredible power. The sensation is so comforting that she just gives in, lying down and letting him pet her while softly enjoying the warmth. Shen Changqing laughs to himself, amazed at how nice her fur feels. After a while, he notices something strange. He's no longer moving his hand, but the fox spirit is still squirming happily on her own. Proud of himself, he chuckles about his golden hand and how it really lives up to its name. Then, he stands up, heads toward the well, and waves goodbye. He tells the little fox that he's too poor to take her in, with no home, no shelter, and a system constantly demanding payment. He suggests she should go find herself a rich master instead. The little fox spirit faints from shock, then immediately jumps up to chase after Shen Changqing. She can't figure him out at all. Just last night, one roar from him scared off 100 ghosts, forced her to reveal her true form, and even stripped away all her powers. Now, even 9 vengeful spirits combined don't dare to show their faces around him. And that simple pat on her head earlier? It actually helped her break through a century of blocked cultivation. She's losing her mind over how outrageous this guy is. Meanwhile, Shen Changqing is rinsing his mouth. Without meaning to, he spits water all over her fluffy fur. He casually tells her to wake up, but the fox suddenly feels like she's bathing in divine spring water. Her eyes sparkle as she fans her tail and thanks nature's blessing. Shen Changqing glances at her while brushing his teeth, teasing, "You like me that much?" But before he can say more, a ghost suddenly appears right beside him, mouth wide open, ready to chomp down. The fox is so startled she nearly faints again. At that moment, the system panel pops up, showing Shen Changqing's remaining life ticking down, 62 hours. Then suddenly dropping to 48. A gold coin shoots out from the system, blasting through the ghost and making it vanish completely. The fox watches the coin zoom around like lightning, her eyes nearly falling out of her head in shock. But things aren't over yet. Shen Changqing suddenly feels a heavy force push him to the ground. His body goes weak, like all his strength has been drained. The system flashes again, 48 hours left, then plummets all the way down to just 14. He's left lying there with no energy at all. Seeing how bad things look, the little fox bites onto his clothes and drags him away from the well. The 9 vengeful spirits have already merged into one, their dark energy at its peak. She panics, thinking, they dared to ambush the immortal master? We need to escape now. As she pulls him along, Shen Changqing feels like his soul is floating into the clouds. His vision blurs, and even a horn seems to sprout from his head. In a daze, he shouts, "Puppy, don't misunderstand." Startled, the fox immediately lets go. Shen Changqing quickly stands up, brushing it off by saying he just got dizzy because he hadn't eaten breakfast yet, and it was nothing serious. The fox is completely convinced he's a master hiding his true power. She thinks he only pretended to faint, just to test her loyalty. Feeling smug, she reassures herself that she passed his test. Meanwhile, Shen Changqing stares at the system panel in horror. His survival time is down to 14 hours, and he's losing it. He shouts that even if he sleeps 8 hours, this is way too short. How is anyone supposed to live like this? To him, the system is nothing but trouble. The fox, on the other hand, watches him argue with thin air and secretly smiles. She thinks every word he says is some kind of profound wisdom her weak cultivation can't possibly understand. She vows to cling tightly to this immortal master, no matter what. At the same time, far away, a Taoist priest is reporting everything to his master. Soon, an old man riding on a sword flies over. He mutters that the expert from last night had weakened the 9 vengeful spirits at Ziku Mansion, so now is the perfect chance to subdue them. This man is Yuan Tiangong, the supervisor of the Great Tang's Imperial Astronomical Bureau. The Taoist priest quickly sends a message to his master, saying he'll go invite the martial judge and the city god of the underworld to help exorcise the ghosts and restore peace. Meanwhile, under the moonlight, old Yuan Tiangong studies the 8 trigrams diagram in his hand, energy swirling around it. He sighs quietly to himself, thinking, that mysterious expert broke the Great Three Yang formation. Could he still be here in Jingyang County? If fate allows, I must meet him and discuss the Tao. Curious about Shinchangqing, Yuan Tiangong starts calculating on his fingers, but no matter how he tries, he can't figure out Shin's background. Shocked, he wonders if Shin's cultivation might actually be higher than his own. Determined, he gathers his energy and heads toward the South Market. There, by coincidence, he spots Shinchangqing fortune-telling for a man. Shin stares at the man's forehead and declares dramatically, "Brother, your glabella is pitch black. A great calamity is about to strike you." The man breaks into a cold sweat. "But, weren't you just reading my palm? Now you're saying my forehead is dark." Shen responds smoothly, "Fortune-telling has many methods. Different paths, same truth. Why cling to the details?" Old Yuan Tiangong nearly chokes in outrage. In broad daylight, this brat dares to swindle people right in front of me. Suddenly, Shen stands up, pulls out a rolled-up painting, and with a flourish, it gleams with a mysterious light. He quickly rolls it back up and hands it to the man. "No worries, brother. Just hang this immortal ink treasure painting in your home, and no evil can harm you. Not $9.99. Not $8.88, only 10 taels of silver, and it's yours." The man's jaw drops at the price, sweating nervously as he hesitates. Just then, an old woman rushes over, loudly exclaiming, "Ah, Taoist Master Shen, our household mistress was possessed by a ghost, and it was you who saved her life." Shinchangqing nearly drools with pride. In his mind, he's already picturing himself one step away from becoming a legendary expert. Of course, he doesn't mention that he actually paid this woman to play her role, and since she's acting so well, he even considers giving her a bonus. The old woman then turns to the crowd and shouts, "How could someone deceive people in the middle of the market? That ghost was terrifying. Thankfully, Taoist Master Shen drove it away. Otherwise, my mistress would have died." The bystanders are stunned, but seeing her so sincere, they all believe it. The man who had his fortune told immediately throws a pile of silver into Shen's hands. "All right, Taoist Master Shen, I'll buy the painting." Shen pockets the silver with a confident grin, acting like the deal was destined all along. But at that moment, Yuan Tiangong finally snaps. He shouts loudly, "Wait, which sect does this so-called immortal belong to? Do you have an official identity certificate issued by the authorities? Which Taoist temple do you practice at?" Shen pushes up his glasses, frowning, and thinks, what's this old guy's problem? Is he trying to pick a fight? Before he can say anything, Yuan Tiangong points straight at him and bellows, "You rotten brat. You're still young. Instead of studying properly, you're out here scamming people. Today, I'll make sure you don't get away with this." Shinchangqing slams his foot on the table and refuses to back down. "Humph, and who exactly are you, old man?" The young man and the old man immediately start barking at each other, neither willing to give an inch. Yuan Tiangong scolds, "You rotten brat, you clearly don't know a thing about the Tao. Selling calligraphy paintings as charms? What a sham." Shin jabs a finger back at him, smirking. "Says who? Everyone's got their own methods. You say my painting doesn't work, where's your proof? Don't just flap your gums. Careful, or I'll sue you for slander." The crowd gasps. This kid even dares to argue evidence with Yuan Tiangong? Yuan Tiangong's face turns red with fury. He points to the old actress in the crowd and shouts, "She's clearly your accomplice. Do you really think you can fool me?" Shen doesn't even blink. Instead, he raises his middle finger and sneers, "Oh yeah? Yuan Tiangong my ass. If you're really Yuan Tiangong, then I'm Emperor Li Shimen himself. Shouldn't you be back at the palace playing with your abacus instead of picking fights with me?" Yuan Tiangong explodes, forming hand seals as golden light bursts from his palms. "How dare you take the sacred name so lightly? Heretic, watch as I crush you with my orthodox Taoist arts." Shen stiffens, wait, this geezer actually knows magic? But before he can panic, Yuan Tiangong suddenly freezes in place, completely motionless. "Huh?" Shen blinks, then mischievously doodles on the old man's palm like a bored child. Yuan Tiangong glares at him in shock, his decades of cultivation, his power, gone like smoke. Shen instantly flips the tables, pointing at Yuan Tiangong with a smug grin. "Look at him, everyone. Clearly this fraud just wanted to chase me out and keep all the business for himself. Shameless, shameless." The crowd, caught up in Shen's bravado, starts chanting, "Yes, yes." Taoist Master Shen, drive this pest away. Meanwhile Yuan Tiangong stares at his own palm, muttering in disbelief. Impossible, how could my power vanish? In all my life, this has never happened. Shen puffs out his chest, hands on his hips, declaring, if you want your household safe and peaceful, if you want to ward off evil, then come to me, Taoist Master Shen. Finally snapping, Yuan Tiangong lunges forward, ready to overturn Shen's fortune-telling table. Even if I can't use my powers, I won't let you scam people in broad daylight. Oi! Careful, old man, my head's expensive, Shen yells. But before Yuan Tiangong can strike, the painting on the table suddenly shines with dazzling golden spiritual light. The Taoist aura surges skyward, stunning everyone. Yuan Tiangong's jaw nearly drops to the floor. This calligraphy contains the great Tao itself. How can a mere painting hold such terrifying power? Shen, meanwhile, grits his teeth, muttering darkly, if I don't earn money, I'll literally die. But if I go down, I'm dragging this old man with me. Before he can finish, Yuan Tiangong suddenly drops to his knees and kowtows. Senior, this junior was blind. I dared to slander a true master. Please forgive my offense. Shen's eyes bulge. What the hell just happened? Wasn't this guy yelling at me 2 minutes ago? The old actress immediately jumps back into her role, pointing dramatically. See? Even this Taoist was humbled by Taoist Master Shen's divine powers. Shen's little sidekick pipes up excitedly. Boss, this is perfect. Free advertisement, don't miss the chance. Shen Chongqing tapped his head with his fan like he just snapped out of it and muttered that, of course, making money was the real priority. Then he quickly put on a calm, serious face, acting all compassionate, saying he wouldn't hold grudges because the old man was also a cultivator and should understand cause and effect. Yuan Tiangong lowered his head, sweating buckets, and thought he must have underestimated Shen. To him, this was the true sign of someone who had reached a higher state, so simple yet so profound. He even reasoned that fate was set by heaven, and helping people too casually would go against that. But asking for a little silver was different. It was a show of sincerity and created good karma. The crowd, dazzled by the golden glow, gasped in amazement. They whispered that heaven's way was indeed clear and that they'd been blind to it all these years. Shen, on the other hand, just rolled his eyes. In his head, he grumbled, forget the fancy talk, just pay me already. At that moment, Yuan Tiangong pulled out a shiny black jade. He nervously said it was his most precious treasure and begged Shen to give him a piece of calligraphy to keep at home. Shen immediately grabbed the jade, turned it over in his hand, and asked what it was even for. Yuan explained it was called a heaven-mending stone. But Shen slammed the table, making the old man jump, and snapped, I don't need rocks. Don't you have anything useful? Panicking, Yuan suddenly held up a golden scroll to his chest and shouted his thanks, promising to study its meaning every day. Then he hurried off, clutching the scroll like it was sacred. The man who had his fortune told earlier looked confused and asked what about him. Shen waved his fan, saying not to worry, he had already planned for this. He pulled out another scroll, golden light spilling over the man's face, and told him it could ward off trouble. The guy didn't hesitate, he paid right away and hugged the scroll like it was treasure. Just like that, Shen's basket of random paintings suddenly became priceless in everyone's eyes. Meanwhile, over at Ziku Mansion, the martial judge was standing in Shen's small courtyard, holding a broom and gritting his teeth. He was upset that the strange energy was growing so quickly, even stronger than before. The young Taoist stared at his compass and said not to panic. His master had already arrived in Jingyang County, and he'd send word soon. But just as he said that, a sudden gust of wind rushed in. Before he could react, a blast of dark energy burst through the door, smashing his compass to pieces. In that critical moment, the martial judge leapt forward, channeled all his strength into the broom, and managed to grab hold of the energy. He shouted to his companion that now was the time to act. The Taoist quickly raised his hand and formed a seal, golden sparks flashing at his fingertips. Behind him, the 8 trigrams formation lit up and sent out a flying sword that shot straight into the purple stream of energy. The clash shook the whole house with a thunder-like boom. From outside, someone yelled angrily, asking who was wrecking their house. Both the Taoist and the martial judge froze in shock. Just then, the stream of dark energy started to fade away. And that's when Shen Chongqing stormed in from outside, grinding his teeth, asking what on earth they were doing. The moment he showed up, both the sword and the strange energy dropped flat onto the ground. Shen looked around at the ruined house, nearly in tears, and complained that he had only stepped out for a moment and everything was already destroyed. Then he noticed the broken doorframe and panicked even more. He had just rented this mansion. Furious, he pointed at the 2 men, accusing them of failing to swindle him last night, so now they'd come to make trouble instead. While he was busy scolding them, he didn't notice that the strange energy had slipped free from the sword behind him. The 2 men spotted it immediately and shouted for him to watch out. The energy twisted into a terrifying shape, radiating eerie power, and they both broke out in cold sweat. They stammered that there was a ghost right at his feet. Shen looked down in confusion, wondering what they were talking about. Right then, the ghostly figure lunged up as if it was about to grab his leg. Shin casually lifted his foot to check, then absent-mindedly stepped right on it. A cloud of smoke rose as the ghost was flattened, though Shin himself was clueless about what he'd done. He just stood there drenched in sweat, thinking something strange had happened. The leftover energy scattered and circled the room angrily, chasing Shin around as he ran in panic, muttering nervously about strange sounds. The two men, however, were stunned. With wide eyes, they declared that the 9 ghostly fiends that had haunted Jingyang County for 15 years had just been finished off with one step. The Taoist quickly stepped forward. He introduced himself as Li Chunfeng, disciple of Yuan Tiangong, and respectfully asked for Shin's name. Shin raised an eyebrow. Li Chunfeng? Yuan Tiangong? Then asked if Li was working at the Imperial Astronomical Bureau. Li admitted his cultivation wasn't high enough yet, so he hadn't joined. Shin then glanced at the martial judge, saying his face looked familiar, like the statue of a city god he'd once seen in a temple. The martial judge also stepped forward politely, introducing himself as the real martial judge from the city god's office. He apologized for the earlier misunderstanding and thanked Shen for not holding a grudge. Shen, still frustrated, lit a cigarette, took a deep breath, and muttered that folks in the Tang dynasty were too simple and honest. Then his eyes teared up as he complained. How was it possible that in just one day, he had run into 3 scammers? What kind of bad luck was this? He spread his arms dramatically, saying he didn't believe in any mystical powers, only in working hard to get rich. Then he pointed around at the mess of his broken house and demanded they talk compensation. The two just stared blankly, not understanding a single word. Shin got even angrier, pointing at their faces and explaining in simple terms. Civil means you pay me money, criminal means I hand you to the officials, and you still pay me money. The martial judge was completely stunned, muttering that as a city god he only received incense. He didn't exactly have cash lying around. Li Chunfeng, on the other hand, thought maybe this expert was speaking in riddles with some deeper meaning. Shin didn't care. When they stayed quiet, he threw down his cigarette and shouted that if they wouldn't talk, then fine, let's go to the authorities. At that, Li Chunfeng quickly tossed him a money pouch with an awkward smile. The martial judge, broke and empty-handed, sighed that they hadn't seen scary ghosts, but poor ghosts, 3 of them standing right here. Li Chunfeng leaned in and whispered to Shin that it was all he had, but he could stay and help repair the house as compensation. Shin looked at the little bit of gold and silver in his hand, frowned, but finally nodded. All right, that'll do. He ordered them to gather bricks and clay and get to work. An hour later, the house was fixed up. Shin stood inside happily, calculating today's earnings. The stone from earlier could only be used as a paperweight. The old man's clothes were worth 2 taels of silver, and after paying a share to the auntie, he had 20 taels total. Just as he was counting the money, a beam of light hit his face, and the system panel appeared out of nowhere, sucking away every last coin. Shin panicked, shouting for it to leave him something. The system ignored him and updated his timer, then displayed that he had hit the first recharge milestone and earned 2 rewards. Shen's eyes lit up as the reward wheel spun, flashing with thousands of items. He was so excited, begging for something rare and powerful. But after all the dings, the system gave him 2 manuals. Shin opened them and nearly lost it. They were just guides on making fertilizer and brewing alcohol. He slammed them on the table, on the verge of crying, complaining that he was starving, and the system handed him this junk. With dark eye bags and his whole body shaking, he grumbled that normal people just couldn't play these pay-to-win games. After a while, Shin patted Li Chunfeng on the shoulder and told him not to hang around anymore. He joked that he wasn't running a free lodging, then politely sent him off, saying it was late and he'd already helped enough for the day. Just then, the little fox spirit ran in carrying a bag in its mouth. Li Chunfeng's eyes went wide, recognizing it as a fox immortal. Shen, meanwhile, just sat down, took the bag of food, and grumbled that bringing him gifts wouldn't work. He could barely feed himself, let alone a fox. Li Chunfeng whispered that it wasn't a dog but a fox, but Shin misunderstood and asked if Chunfeng was talking to him. At that moment, the fox spirit stood up on 2 legs, annoyed, as if saying, "Don't talk nonsense or you'll regret it." Shin only laughed, stroked its paw gently, and said if it insisted on staying, he'd let it. He even gave it a nickname, Xiao Bai. The fox spirit barked happily, clearly accepting. Later that night, high above the mansion, 2 dragons flew through the misty clouds. The smaller one called out to her sister, worried about their father's condition and wanting to find help. The older one suddenly noticed a flash of golden light and pointed it out. Both of them instantly transformed into elegant young women, sensing that the light contained powerful energy. They guessed it might be an immortal or some rare treasure, so they decided to check it out. Back in his room, Shin sat staring at the system panel, watching his remaining survival time tick down to just over 32 hours. He pouted miserably, his stomach growling nonstop, and banged his head on the bed in frustration, whining that he was starving and the system had taken all his money. To comfort himself, he even bit the bedsheet, close to tears, muttering that if things went on like this, he wouldn't even need the system to finish him off. He'd starve first. Just then, his door glowed with golden light, mixed strangely with ghostly energy. The little fox spirit noticed it and jumped onto the roof, wondering why the aura felt so mysterious. Under the moonlight, she suddenly felt her own power boiling over, an unstoppable urge rising in her heart, and she thought about how much she wanted to be with Shen. As she absorbed the surrounding demonic energy, her form shifted back to her true self, a young woman. Standing tall on the roof, she glared at the figures below, declaring that the ghosts who had been driven away earlier were now foolishly coming back to disturb Shen's rest. Below, the 9 lingering ghosts had merged into one, releasing a heavy, eerie aura as if preparing to devour everything in sight. Li Chunfeng turned pale, frozen where he stood. But the fox spirit didn't back down. She summoned her own power, and behind her appeared the majestic shadow of a great fox. The merged ghost roared back, forming a terrifying specter, and launched itself straight at her. Li Chunfeng stood behind the scene, shaking all over and breaking into a cold sweat. In front of him, the fox spirit and the ghost made from 9 restless souls were locked in a fierce clash. Meanwhile, Shen inside the room was still fast asleep, sprawled in bed in the most undignified way. Far away, the 2 dragon sisters were watching the battle in shock. The younger one gasped, saying the demonic aura was way too strong for a small place like Jingyang County. The elder lowered her gaze at the scene below and explained that the man in the room was like a shining beacon. No wonder the spirits couldn't resist gathering around him. Up close, the fight looked grand, filled with wild energy. But in reality, it was basically 2 women scrapping like rivals, tugging at each other as if arguing over a man. Just then, the dragon sisters descended from the sky, shouting at the foxes, demanding to know what demons dared to cause chaos here. The 2 foxes only looked confused but kept pulling at each other. The white dragon stepped up with a stern face, saying only strong demons could remain so bold in front of true dragons. The merged ghost glared at them and sneered, mocking the sisters as long worms, and claiming they were just here for the man too. It even offered to team up, suggesting they get rid of the fox spirit together and split Shen half and half. Hearing that, the fox spirit's expression darkened. Her claws pointed right at the ghost as she growled, furious at being mocked. She then exploded forward with a barrage of punches, shouting her title as the Fox Immortal of Qingqiu. She beat the ghost like someone venting on an X, each strike landing with frightening power. The dragon sisters were stunned to tears, wondering if the fox had practiced some extreme body strengthening technique. After her final strike, the fox stood surrounded by black energy, her eyes sharp and filled with fierce determination. The ghost was left barely holding together, only a fragment of its form remaining. The fox spirit glared ahead, gritting her teeth and challenging anyone else who wanted to step forward. The white dragon wasn't about to back down. She formed a hand seal and summoned her signature spell, calling thunder from the heavens. But just as the lightning was about to strike, a golden light screen appeared around Shen's courtyard, blocking the attack and bouncing it back. The white dragon was stunned. Her powerful spell had completely vanished. The fox spirit immediately charged at her, furious that anyone would dare cast magic around Shen's home. With a single earth-shaking punch, she sent the white dragon flying hundreds of meters away. When the white dragon crashed to the ground, she accidentally spotted a sword glowing with dazzling light. Her eyes lit up as she realized, there might really be a hidden expert here, someone who could even save their father. But before she could think further, the fox spirit was already charging at her again, refusing to let her rest as the battle continued. Li Chunfeng was hiding in a pile of straw, bawling his eyes out. He muttered in disbelief, wondering if this was really how immortals fought. Up in the air, the fox spirit suddenly shouted out the name of her ultimate technique and unleashed blazing flames. The white dragon refused to lose face and fired off her own big move, shouting just as dramatically. The two flew past each other midair like it was the climax of some epic stage play. The white dragon landed on the roof, still throwing out powerful skills with long, grand names. After a while, though, she was exhausted and just sat there glaring at the fox spirit. The fox wasn't having it. She lashed out with a kick, but the white dragon dodged, leaving a poor tree nearby to take the full impact instead. The white dragon leapt away to escape, and of course, the fox spirit gave chase. In her rush, though, she stepped on something black. Inside the room, Shen Changqing was just waking up, grumpy as ever. He rubbed his head and yelled about how noisy it was outside every night. He grumbled that if people didn't want to sleep, fine, but why keep others awake? Furious, he stormed out and yanked the door open. What he saw made him freeze. The white dragon had tied up the little fox with some kind of glowing rope, just like a pet. Shen immediately panicked, slammed the door shut, and muttered to himself that it must just be hallucinations from all the noise. To be sure, he opened the door again. This time he saw the fox turning the fight around spectacularly. Cold sweat broke out all over him. Mouth wide open, he blurted out, What's going on here? By then, the white dragon was pinned down while the fox spirit looked smug over her win. But Shin wasn't paying attention to who was winning. He was furious about something else, his missing dog. He yelled for Xiaobai, scolding the animal for not barking when so many people barged into the courtyard. When Xiaobai didn't answer, Shin stomped outside, raging about where his dog had gone. He stormed right up to the two women still fighting and shouted at them to cut it out. He demanded to know why they were brawling in his courtyard in the middle of the night instead of sleeping, and most importantly, where his dog was. The white dragon shot him an annoyed glare and told him to stop making noise, claiming she was saving his life. Shin didn't believe her at all. He grabbed her hand, accusing her of stealing his dog and insisting she come with him to see the authorities. The second his hand touched her, though, both women suddenly froze. Their bodies trembled as if some invisible power was pressing down on them. The white dragon's face went stiff, then a surge of power made her whole body react uncontrollably. She gasped, completely shocked, and demanded to know what kind of strange ability Shin had. Just one touch, and her energy felt like it was boiling over. Finally, she exhaled sharply and scolded him, revealing her identity. She said she was a princess of the East Sea Dragon clan and snapped that if she hadn't stepped in, the fox spirit would have already finished him off long ago. Shin Changqing shoved the little fox spirit aside, glared at the white dragon, and accused her of stealing his dog. She looked stunned, saying she didn't even know what he was talking about. But Shin didn't buy it. He gripped her hand tight and shouted that she was just pretending to be some princess, probably a fox in disguise, and demanded she show her true form. Then, out of nowhere, Shin started introducing himself in the most dramatic way possible. He lifted the white dragon with one hand and went on about how he was the heir of socialism, a man of modern society, a street cleaning pioneer, even runner-up in a children's Latin dance contest. Basically, he listed a whole bunch of random titles like he was announcing himself on stage. The white dragon, however, felt her powers completely restrained just from his touch. Her face turned red as she thought to herself that this man was definitely not normal. At that moment, her sister Xiaoqing tried to rush in to help, but the white dragon panicked and told her not to. Shin simply blocked with one hand and scolded them for resisting. On the side, Li Chunfeng and the fox spirit were just sitting there watching the chaos. Li Chunfeng was screaming in awe, calling Shin an expert for spinning the white dragon around like a toy. The little fox even praised Shin like a fangirl, while Li Chunfeng swore this was the first time in his life he'd truly seen what legendary cultivators could do. After twirling them around, the two dragon sisters were left shivering in the corner. Shin lectured them like a grumpy neighbor. He complained about barging into his house, making noise at night, and, of course, stealing his dog. He told them to confess where they'd hidden it. Right then, Li Chunfeng came running like the wind, dragging the little fox spirit in his arms. He proudly offered her up, saying this was Shin's dog. Shin froze and pointed at him, completely confused. Why was Li Chunfeng even here? He scolded him for sneaking back instead of going home after fixing the door like he was told. Li Chunfeng's eyes went wide, and he quickly knelt on the ground, pretending to be pitiful. With tears streaming, he begged Shin to accept him as a disciple, calling him immortal master and asking to be taught divine techniques. Meanwhile, far away in the early morning skies of Jingyang County, a black eagle soared through the air. It was no ordinary bird. This was the Black Eagle King, one of the 4 great demon kings. He landed on a lighthouse, staring at the golden glow shining in the distance. The light made him uneasy, but curiosity got the better of him. He muttered about how the Black Mountain Great King had sent him to scout the area, and yet here was this strange golden glow in the 9 Ghosts territory. His eyes narrowed as greed filled his heart. If it was really a treasure, he thought, bringing it back would make him leader of the 4 kings. Just imagining the other 3 bowing to him made him burst out in laughter. Half an hour later, Shin Changqing was sitting in his little house, looking dazed. In front of him, the dragon sisters and Li Chunfeng were kneeling like students waiting for a teacher. Shin waved them off, saying they had the wrong person. He was just an ordinary guy, no powers, no ghost-catching skills, nothing. He told Li Chunfeng to stop calling him Immortal Master and quickly leave. Then he turned to the 2 dragon sisters. According to them, their father was seriously ill and they had only passed by looking for medicine when they got caught up with the fox spirit. Shin sighed and said the whole dog-stealing thing had been a misunderstanding, but curing their father was beyond him. If they wanted help, they should find a real doctor. After that, Shin slung a basket over his back, frowned, and told everyone it was already morning. He had no breakfast to offer and needed to go earn a living, so they could just make themselves comfortable. Then he walked out the door. The Azure Dragon broke into tears, whispering to her sister that maybe they'd upset the Immortal Master, and that's why he wouldn't help. She thought since the fox spirit seemed to be his pet, they would need to show even more sincerity. Li Chunfeng politely introduced himself, bowing with great respect. As Shin walked away, the 3 of them watched him go. From inside the basket, the fox spirit poked out its head, sticking out its tongue and teasing them like a mischievous child. A little later, Shin arrived at the market with the fox spirit in tow and started setting up a stall. He slapped the table dramatically, striking a cool pose as he announced his shop was open. Immediately, a crowd formed. People shouted for him to read their fortunes first, waving silver, convinced he was the real deal after scaring off that Taoist before. But just as things were heating up, a county official arrived with a group of guards. It was Magistrate Feng. He pushed through the crowd, pointed at Shen, and accused him of being a street swindler. Shen jumped onto the table, furious, demanding to know who had reported him. Before he could finish, 2 guards pressed their staffs to his neck. Right then, the martial judge came running, shouting for Shen. He pointed to the distance, warning that something terrible had happened at the Ziku mansion. Magistrate Feng looked up and saw dark energy rising from Shen's courtyard like smoke, covering the sky. People gasped, saying the Ziku mansion was haunted and wondering how something so strange could appear in broad daylight. But Shen just squinted at the sky and saw nothing. He muttered that it looked perfectly clear to him. Magistrate Feng froze in confusion, while Shen turned on the martial judge with a gloomy face, accusing him of making up stories to mess with him. Meanwhile, back at Shen's small courtyard, the Black Eagle King was rummaging through everything like a burglar. He flipped tables, tossed things around, muttering to himself about the treasure he'd seen glowing earlier. But no matter where he looked, nothing turned up. Scratching his head, he wondered how a vision of golden light could appear and then leave no trace at all. Meanwhile, the market was packed shoulder to shoulder, buzzing like a festival. People were shouting for everyone to come see. Apparently Taoist Master Shen was about to deal with the old spirit haunting the Ziku mansion, the one the whole county had been afraid of for years. Hidden in the roadside bushes, the Dragon Sisters and Li Chunfeng were spying. Hearing the chatter, they gasped in excitement, convinced that their immortal master had returned. Out on the street, Shen Changqing strutted forward like a refined young scholar, fanning himself with a folding fan. Behind him, the martial judge held a tall flag, and Magistrate Feng carried another banner, looking all official. The little fox spirit dashed by the bushes, giving the 3 eavesdroppers a playful slap each that sent them tumbling. Then the fox spirit transformed into her human form, scolding them. She said they couldn't even guard their own home, yet they still dreamed of learning from the expert. She warned that the one inside the courtyard was the Black Eagle King, one of Black Mountain's top followers, far too much for them to handle. When they looked worried, she snorted, saying they should just watch, because even if Black Mountain's leader himself showed up, her master would still turn him into nothing. Inside the yard, the Black Eagle King pricked up his ears. He faintly heard words like Black Mountain and expert, and suddenly panicked. He remembered his boss warning him about powerful people in the mortal world, and he wondered if he had stumbled into a trap. Soon after, Shen and the others reached the courtyard. The martial judge looked serious and told Shen that the place was dangerous. He said he'd stay outside to keep the civilians safe and leave the spirit inside for Shen to handle. Magistrate Feng, on the other hand, said if Shen could handle this haunting, he'd admit the young man wasn't a fraud. But deep down, Feng smirked to himself. If Shen failed, he'd use this chance to scare others into obeying the law and boost his own authority. Back inside, the Black Eagle King was getting nervous. He muttered that someone had mentioned an expert coming and decided he couldn't stay here any longer. He'd come back later to search for the treasure. With that, he rushed toward the wall, trying to slip through. But just as he tried his escape trick, an unseen force blocked him, and he slammed right into the wall. Stars spun around his head, leaving him dizzy and dazed. Just then, Shen Changqing heard the noise inside and pushed the door open. He thought the thumping must have been a rat and even muttered about how big it sounded. The Black Eagle King, who was hanging from the ceiling, nearly choked when he heard that. Rat? Is he calling me a rat? I'm a great demon king. He glared down, but Shen didn't even look up. He was too busy hugging a mirror and turning it around like a fool. Outside, the martial judge and Magistrate Feng's group stared hard at the closed door. Since it was quiet, the judge proudly whispered that the expert must have already handled the spirit inside. Meanwhile, Shen sat at the table, staring at 2 manuals, a lighter, and his iPhone 15 Plus. He grumbled to himself, worrying that if his performance flopped, he'd lose his livelihood, or worse, get tossed into jail. Right then, his lousy system gave him a reminder that his survival timer was still ticking. Shen sighed, saying he had no choice but to use his wits to get through this. Then his eyes landed on the phone, and he smirked. He thought, maybe I can use this thing, not just to get out of trouble, but maybe even to make some money. He quickly started swiping and opened up his downloads. Turns out, he still had a bunch of movies saved from before he time traveled. But the moment he hit play, strange noises blasted out. From outside, the martial judge and Feng froze in place, looking totally confused. Feng stiffly muttered that the sounds must be ghosts messing around, but he couldn't figure out why their cries sounded so weird. Inside, Shen panicked, swiping furiously and muttering about shaky hands, glad nobody else was around to see his mistake. Up on the ceiling, the Black Eagle King nearly fell off in shock. He stared at the phone, convinced it was some kind of magical tool ritual that could chant spells automatically. The problem was, he had never heard of any incantation that went Yamit or Aya Aya. Oblivious, Shin lifted the phone, struck a handsome pose, and snapped a selfie. The camera flash suddenly lit up the whole room, blinding the Black Eagle King. He shrieked, clutching his face, certain that Shin had finally launched a hidden attack. His whole body trembled as he thought, this mortal knew I was here all along, just waiting for the perfect chance to strike. Meanwhile, Shin happily kept snapping selfies, grinning at his reflection. He had no idea the Black Eagle King was silently clinging to the ceiling, sweating buckets, and muttering to himself about how cruel and cunning humans could be. Outside, Magistrate Feng was already losing patience. He warned that if Shin Changqing didn't come out soon, the officers would drag him out. The martial judge just closed his eyes and muttered that doubting an expert like Shin was foolish. Right then, Shin finally walked out, acting calm. He reminded everyone how this mansion had been haunted for years with no one able to handle it. But today, he claimed he had already sealed the spirit inside. To prove it, he proudly showed them his phone screen, where a terrifying figure appeared. The crowd froze, completely spooked. A cold mist seemed to rise from the ground, and some even swore they saw a ghostly woman crawling up from the well, scratching the ground with sharp nails. Everyone went pale, breaking into a cold sweat. Even the martial judge admitted the resentment was way heavier than what they had seen before. Shin quickly reassured them that the spirit was already trapped inside his treasure mirror, so it couldn't harm anyone anymore. To make it more convincing, he even played the video backward and forward, saying he could control it however he wanted. But just when everyone was buying it, he accidentally swiped to something else, an awkward scene of a girl making strange noises. Shin didn't notice and kept shaking the phone, bragging about how strong he was. The crowd, instead of realizing the mistake, went wild with praise. They shouted that Shin was an immortal master who could play with even the fiercest spirits like it was nothing. Magistrate Feng nervously pointed out that the treasure mirror had gone dark. Shin awkwardly muttered that the battery had just died, then quickly stuffed the phone back into his robe. He coughed a few times and smoothly changed the subject, saying that mortals had already seen enough. He warned them the house was now contaminated with energy, so keeping it peaceful would be hard. Luckily, he said, he had been studying protective calligraphy and could write charms to keep homes safe. The moment he said that, people rushed forward with money pouches, begging for talismans. Even Feng's expression changed, and he joined in the line like everyone else. Soon, the crowd was buzzing. Some said they'd been waiting since dawn, others argued about cutting in line. Word spread fast, and more people from all over the county started queuing, wanting Shin's charms. Two young men even came out holding freshly written talismans. One was laughing, the other crying. They said Shin's hand was so swollen from writing that it looked painful, but still, he kept working for the people. Someone quickly corrected them, insisting it wasn't swelling but qi overflowing from the master's hand. By the end of the day, the whole county had been stirred up, but poor Shin's hand was so cramped it looked like a twisted claw. He sighed, invited everyone to stay for a meal, and joked that after all that writing, his hand had basically turned into a printing press. Shin Changqing struggled to push the door open with his cramped, claw-like hand, but right outside were four starry-eyed fanatics staring at him. He froze, then quickly slammed the door shut again. Inside, he tossed a handful of gold coins into the air, laughing like he'd just won the lottery. Finally, he thought, he didn't need to bow down to the system anymore. He was rich. Meanwhile, the martial judge and the dragon sisters overheard him and got all excited. To them, Shin keeping them for a meal meant he was acknowledging them. The fox immortal, though, couldn't help but feel a little worried, like she was about to lose favor. Just then, golden light suddenly burst out in the courtyard, and a mysterious voice echoed. The fanatics outside stared in awe, thinking the great expert was making a move again. Up on the ceiling, the poor Black Eagle King took the hit, his body twitching. He was speechless, first fists, now golden light. What had he done to deserve this? Shen, on the other hand, just sighed at the coins vanishing, grumbling that his money was gone before he even got to enjoy it. But then something amazing happened. His survival time shot up by hundreds of hours. Shen quickly clasped his hands, begging the system to give him another trick. The system responded with a recipe for making handmade soap: grind seashells, add water and ash, pour it into molds, and let it sit for 10 to 30 days. Shen's eyes immediately lit up like coins. Soap was unheard of in this era, and if he could make it, the profits would be huge. The excitement didn't last, though. He stared at his empty chest and turned pale. Soap took at least 10 days to finish, and he only had 10 left. He slumped down, feeling completely hopeless. At that moment, a loud thud startled him. The Black Eagle King finally fell from the ceiling, feathers scattering everywhere. Shen blinked in surprise, then curiously walked over and grabbed him. To Shen, it wasn't a mighty demon king, it just looked like a huge wild chicken that had somehow flown inside. Laughing, he lifted it onto his shoulder, saying this poor thing must have been trapped and starving. Tucking the wild chicken under his arm, he walked outside and announced that he was a kind person. He didn't even dare to step on grass, let alone harm a creature. Li Chunfeng and the dragon sisters peeked out, whispering to each other. Some thought he might be using resurrection magic on a demon king, which sounded dangerous. Others were moved by his compassion, saying that in the eyes of such an immortal master, all beings were equal. Then they started dreaming. If he could even revive a demon king, surely curing their father's illness would be nothing for him. When the fanatics saw what Shen Changqing was cooking, their eyes went wide. At first, they thought he was just roasting beans, but then they realized it was the wild chicken from earlier. Instead of a nice smell, though, thick mystical energy started pouring out of it. They huddled together, whispering nervously. Everyone knew that eating the flesh of powerful creatures was dangerous, and this was supposedly a demon king. How could the expert possibly eat that? But Shen didn't care. He happily skewered a piece of juicy meat and invited everyone to try his cooking. The four fanatics instantly turned pale, making excuses to escape. One said he suddenly had urgent business, another claimed his mom wouldn't let him stay out late, another quietly backed away, and the last one just clung to her sister in tears. The white dragon, however, stepped forward bravely, saying she would try it first. Before she could, the food vanished in a flash. Everyone looked again, only to see the little fox spirit chomping down on a massive chicken leg. Shen was furious, telling it to spit it out, but the fox ignored him and kept savoring the meat, slowly absorbing all the energy inside. The dragon sisters gasped, amazed that the fox spirit was testing the food for them. Even among foxes, there are good ones, they thought. Soon, only bones were left. But then the fox suddenly staggered, looking dizzy, and collapsed to the ground. Everyone panicked, thinking it might be in danger. Shen checked and confirmed it was still alive, though strangely, its expression looked way too happy. To everyone's shock, the fox suddenly jumped up and started dancing around, saying it felt amazing, like its whole body was overflowing with spiritual power. The white dragon was stunned. How could it survive something so strong? Shen just shrugged and cut up more meat, offering it to Li Chunfeng and the martial judge as thanks for their help that day. The two hesitated but eventually took it. The fox spirit, looking blissful, reassured them that his cooking was beyond imagination, even better than legendary heavenly fruits. The dragon sisters were already crying tears of joy as they stuffed more meat into their mouths. As soon as Li Chunfeng and the judge finished eating, they suddenly felt bursts of spiritual energy. Their bodies lit up as they struggled to control the overwhelming power. The sisters also felt their cultivation rise rapidly, blue and yellow light shooting into the sky from Shen's small courtyard. They hugged each other, amazed at their breakthroughs, calling his roasted meat a true delicacy from the immortal realm. Shen stood proudly with his hands on his hips, grinning. With this kind of cooking, he bragged, these ancient folks simply couldn't resist. If he opened a barbecue shop, even the emperor himself would have to line up for a taste. Li Chunfeng and the martial judge couldn't hold back their energy anymore. Power burst out of them as they grabbed each other and started spinning around like they were dancing the tango. One of them shouted that the roasted meat had so much spiritual energy it felt like they might grow wings and fly. The other agreed, saying their body was overflowing with power. Shen Changqing watched with wide eyes, muttering that the scene was getting way too spicy for him to handle. Then, the white dragon suddenly thought of her father still suffering back in the dragon palace. Tears filled her eyes as she cried about how unfilial she felt, enjoying herself here while he was still in danger. Shen looked at her, confused, and joked that he didn't even add chili, so why was she crying? Right after, the dragon sisters knelt down and begged Shen for medicine to save their father, saying they'd serve him loyally for life. Shen rolled his eyes and reminded them that he didn't know medicine. But then he paused, thought for a moment, and came up with an idea. Why not stay by his side and help him? Once he earned money, they could use it to cure their father's illness. The two sisters immediately agreed to follow his arrangements. Meanwhile, far away in the dark forest outside Jingyang County, glowing eyes appeared in the shadows. A massive tiger stepped out, sniffing the air. This was the Golden Star Tiger King, one of the 4 great demon kings. It grumbled about its missing scout, wondering why the bald bird hadn't returned yet, saying it was starving. Morning soon came. Birds chirped, flowers bloomed, and Shen Changqing's cheerful singing echoed across the courtyard. The dragon sisters paused in their meditation to listen. The white dragon and the martial judge were so moved they burst into tears, claiming it was the rhythm of the Tao itself, and they needed to focus and comprehend it. The fox spirit just frowned, mumbling that they really didn't get how the world worked. Inside his room, Shen hummed happily while staring at his system panel. For the first time, he felt at ease, finally able to wake up naturally without worrying about his survival time running out. Then his eyes fell on the display of a jar of fine wine. He figured mid-grade wine would be the fastest way to make money. With his modern cooking skills, he could set up a barbecue stall, sell roasted chicken and duck, and even have the dragon sisters help as servers. Who in this ancient era could resist that? The thought made his face flush. With a sly smile, he opened the door and stepped outside, already daydreaming about his grand plan. Early in the morning, Shen Changqing stepped out of his room and was immediately startled by Dong Li's loud voice asking if he had any orders for the day. He jumped and complained she almost scared him half to death. Still, since the sisters had already decided to follow him as servants, he pulled out a stack of money and handed it to her. Their mission was simple: go buy wine, but don't get ripped off at small shops. He also told them to pick up some good bamboo along the way since that didn't cost anything. The sisters agreed right away and hurried off. Not long after, the martial judge came forward and politely said his work here was done, so he should return to the city god temple. Shen waved him off, letting him go. As the judge left, he muttered under his breath that Shen sure knew how to put on an act. Then Li Chunfeng stepped up, smiling confidently. Shen thought he was leaving too, but Li Chunfeng explained that his cultivation was weak and he wanted to stay, follow Shen, and learn from him. Shen didn't mind, free help was always welcome, so he agreed. A little later, Shen, Li Chunfeng, and the little fox spirit walked together through the bustling marketplace. Vendors were shouting everywhere, selling everything from steamed buns to scissors. When they got to the wine stalls, Shen nearly cried looking at the prices. Even the cheapest jars cost a fortune. He grumbled to himself that back in modern times, cheap liquor was everywhere thanks to technology and mass production. Here though, he didn't have the capital to make that happen. With a sigh, he decided he'd have to start small and sell roast duck first to earn some money. While he was stressing over it, Li Chunfeng patted his shoulder and told him not to worry about money since he had already grasped the essence of creation. Shen got annoyed at that and pointed at a plump young lady walking by, asking Li what he saw. Li Chunfeng replied that she looked like a noblewoman. Shen shook his head and explained that ordinary people only saw her fancy clothes, while cultivators saw her destined fortune. But what most people missed was that the things around her, like gold, weren't just mundane objects. He went on to explain that gold wasn't ordinary at all. It was formed from ancient stars, carried into this world before heaven and earth fully took shape, tied to the dragon veins for countless years. Yet people only dug it up to make jewelry, never realizing it was as old as the world itself, carrying the essence of creation. Li Chunfeng listened with his mouth wide open, completely stunned. He dropped to his knees, bowing again and again, admitting he had been too shallow, always treating things as ordinary objects. Shen Changqing, meanwhile, was laughing to himself inside, thinking, heh, small trick. I'll fool him so much he won't even know which way is north. In the end, he'll just end up being the bodyguard for my roast chicken shop. Li Chunfeng then looked up sincerely, saying his cultivation had been stuck for years, probably because he was too caught up in worldly distractions. Thanks to Shen's words just now, he felt he was only one step away from a breakthrough. He begged for more guidance. Shen put on a serious face and leaned in close, whispering something that sounded deep and mysterious. The value of life has two sides. It shows in what you contribute. Ideals create a new world, and hardship builds the foundation in your heart. Of course, what he was really doing was reciting a bit of philosophy from the future. Li Chunfeng repeated those words over and over, looking like he had just unlocked a secret of the heavens. He even started laughing and crying at the same time, saying the demon in his heart that had blocked him for 3 years was finally gone. He bowed again, promising he would never forget these lines and would keep chanting them for life. Shen smiled smugly, thinking, future knowledge really works. This guy is totally hooked. Time to push a little further. So he asked Li Chunfeng a serious question. In this world, people could practice countless mystical arts to try and reach immortality. So why did so many still fight to become emperor instead? Li Chunfeng thought hard, then explained that of course rulers also wanted long life, but true immortality was nearly impossible. Even with cultivation, most people only lived a few decades longer, and very few reached 100. The word immortality was something people longed for, but almost no one achieved. The moment he finished, Shen Changqing's whole body seemed to glow. He chuckled and said, "Immortality? That's not so hard. If you think about it, I've already lived more than 1,000 years. Right now it's the Tang dynasty, but before I time traveled, it was already the 21st century. From then until now, that's at least 1,300 years of life." When Li Chunfeng heard that Shen Changqing had lived for more than 1,000 years, he was completely stunned. His face turned serious, and he thought, only an immortal could do that. He must be a celestial being. With that thought, he asked nervously if following the path of cultivation could also help him live forever. Shen Changqing hid his grin behind his fan, thinking, he's fallen for it, he. Then he turned away, trying to look all mysterious, and said that if Li Chunfeng followed him for 2 or 3 years, it wouldn't be a problem. Hearing this, Li Chunfeng was overjoyed, his eyes wide and sparkling like he'd just struck gold. He quickly asked if Shen would accept him as a disciple. Shen then put on a glow of white light and said he normally didn't take students, but since Li had shown determination, he'd reluctantly take him on as a registered disciple. Without hesitation, Li Chunfeng dropped to his knees in front of everyone, asking Shen to accept his bow. Shen immediately started sweating, waving his hands like, enough, people are watching. He reminded him that he already had a master, Yuan Tiangong, so he wouldn't teach him Taoist techniques. But since he had called him master, he'd still take care of him, starting by asking him to carry some groceries. Soon, the two of them came back from the market with chickens and ducks in their arms. Li Chunfeng looked puzzled and asked if they were for dinner. Shin grinned and said this was his money-making secret, and Li would soon understand. Not long after, they were testing out the roasting oven. The ducks turned golden and crispy, the smell filling the air, making both their mouths water. Shin brushed honey over the skin, sprinkled spices, even poured some beer over it, turning the ducks into a mouth-watering masterpiece. By the time the sun had set, the two were still busy with the roast. Shin wiped his forehead and wondered why Dong Li and Little Qing hadn't come back yet. It was way too late for just buying wine. Just then, Magistrate Feng rushed in with 2 guards, panic written all over his face. Shin quickly helped him steady himself and asked what was wrong. The magistrate explained that something strange had happened at 10 Mile Village. The Hong family's old mansion was in chaos, and an entire household had been mysteriously finished off by a demon. When Shin Changqing heard the word demon, his face instantly turned pale. "What, are you serious?" he asked, clearly unhappy. Not long after, he and Li Chunfeng arrived at the Hong family's mansion. The air was heavy with sorrow, neighbors whispering about how tragic it was that all 3 members of the Hong family were gone. Some said the place had always been haunted, that misfortune seemed to follow anyone nearby, and now this disaster proved it. Others quickly urged each other to leave before they too caught the same bad luck. Shin stood stiff, eyes wide, clearly shaken. He and Li Chunfeng went closer to look at the scene. The villagers kept muttering that it had to be the work of demons. Some even claimed 10 Mile Village used to be a giant tomb, and the Hong family had been living right on top of it, constantly surrounded by unclean energy. Magistrate Feng wiped his forehead nervously, admitting that strange deaths had been happening in the Hong family for years, but the officials never found the cause. Now with the entire household gone, things were completely out of control. He added that normally this would be a case for the Imperial Astronomical Bureau, but since the people were panicking, they needed Shin's help. Li Chunfeng immediately stepped up, assuring the magistrate that since he worked for the bureau, he couldn't ignore this. And with his master here, nothing bad could stand against them. Shin's face went dark at that. Inside, he was thinking, why are you dragging me into this? I never agreed to this mess. I'm not a ghost hunter, I just write. But out loud, he forced a smile and cleverly shifted the responsibility, praising his disciples' skills and suggesting that Li handle it as a test. Magistrate Feng, however, suddenly remembered something worse. He said some villagers had seen 2 young ladies from Shin's household taken away by demons. Shin quickly waved his hand, insisting it wasn't demons but probably wild animals. Then it hit him what Feng had just said, his eyes widened. Wait, who did you say was captured? Before anyone could answer, a shout rang out, ordering hunters to gather immediately. Meanwhile, in another location, the 2 dragon sisters were trapped, sitting on a pile of eerie white bones. The younger one trembled, whispering she didn't want to die. Her sister comforted her, saying not to worry, the immortal master would come. Just then, a loud, mocking laugh filled the air. The beast holding them, Man Shan, sneered at the mention of an immortal master. The older sister glared at him, warning him to let them go, declaring her identity as a princess of the Dragon Clan, daughter of the East Sea Dragon King. But Man Shan only laughed harder. He mocked her claim, saying it didn't matter who she was. He revealed his own background proudly. His father was the Tiger King Man Shan, one of the 4 great lords under the Black Mountain Great Immortal. And to him, weak Dragon Clan members were nothing more than spoils for his master's enjoyment. Little Qing was terrified, crying that she didn't want to become anyone's concubine. Meanwhile, at the edge of the forest, Shin Changqing's group had already started their search. The hunters reported that they'd found fresh tiger tracks and were confident they could follow them straight to the beast's hiding place. Li Chunfeng, worried about the danger, told Shin that it was too risky to let the hunters get involved with such a fierce creature. But the hunters just laughed it off, proudly saying they had plenty of experience and had even hunted a tiger together last year. Shin sighed and rubbed his forehead, agreeing that the hunters were indeed skilled, but he couldn't stop worrying about Dong Li and Little Qing, whose safety was still unknown. After a while, the group came across a cave. The hunters quickly checked around and confirmed it was the only entrance. Plans were being made when Li Chunfeng pulled out his 8 trigrams compass. The moment he used it, the tool glowed with golden light, revealing the truth. The creature inside was no ordinary beast but the Golden Star Tiger King Man Shan, ranked on the Bureau's wanted list with a danger level of 4 stars. Li Chunfeng admitted to himself that he was no match for such a powerful enemy. Determined, he took out a glowing charm and began writing spells across the compass, setting up a formation to seal the monster inside. Just as he was deep into the ritual, a hand suddenly patted his shoulder. Startled, he spun around and saw Shin Changqing. In that instant, the formation fizzled out. Shen casually told him to stop playing around and go help the others. Li Chunfeng protested, saying this wasn't a normal tiger but a dangerous demon king. Shen waved it off, saying they'd talk about magic later. After they caught the beast, he'd even teach Li some immortal realm techniques. Hearing that, Li's eyes lit up with excitement. Inside the cave, Manshan the tiger was snoozing on top of a pile of white bones, looking content. The two sisters nearby were drowsy too, but worry was written all over their faces. Suddenly, Dongli sniffed the air and woke up. She felt movement outside and whispered to her sister that many people had arrived. It had to be the immortal master coming to save them. Back outside, the rescue plan looked a bit unusual. Shen Changqing was holding a drum, and poor Li Chunfeng had been made to wear a tiger head costume. Li, completely unsure, asked if this plan could actually work. Shen just laughed and said, "We'll find out soon enough." Right after Shen Changqing shouted, he banged the drum and yelled for the tiger to come out. The noise was so loud that Man Shan woke up, annoyed that someone dared disturb his nap. Shen tried to keep drumming happily, but something startled him, and he dropped everything with a loud, "Oh my!" Li Chunfeng, still stuck inside the tiger head, was so scared he nearly fainted. Everyone froze when they saw it. Manshan walked out of the cave, eyes glowing cold, looking huge and terrifying. The younger folks gasped, wondering how a beast could grow that big. But instead of panicking, Shen suddenly started doing a goofy lambada dance, shouting for Li Chunfeng to copy him. Li was sweating buckets, wondering if this so-called magic even worked, but still shook his hips like he was told. Under the moonlight, he even turned the tiger head to give a playful little pose. To everyone's shock, Manshan actually saw the tiger head as a cute tigress. His eyes lit up, and he rushed forward, totally smitten, trying to get close. Poor Li was inside thinking, what kind of trick is this? Since when could Master charm a demon king like this? But before he could figure it out, the tiger's sudden embrace nearly knocked him over. Meanwhile, Shen gave the signal, and hundreds of men jumped from the bushes. A giant net flew out, trying to trap Manshan, and right after that, archers fired wave after wave of arrows. Manshan roared in anger, calling the humans despicable, while arrows thudded into the ground dangerously close to Li Chunfeng. He screamed that he was still down there and begged not to get shot. Some hunters complained that the tiger's skin was so tough, the arrows barely went through. Others started daydreaming about how much the pelt would sell for if they brought it into the city. Shen, overhearing that, suddenly got excited too. His eyes lit up with dollar signs, thinking about how much money the skin was worth. Manshan grew furious and swung his claws, releasing waves of energy that knocked people back. In the chaos, Li Chunfeng's fake tiger head fell off, exposing him. He looked up nervously at the giant beast towering over him, forcing a shaky smile and greeting him awkwardly. Hey there, tiger brother." Manshan got furious and gathered his strength, aiming a massive punch right at Li Chunfeng's head. Li panicked and screamed for his master to save him. Shen Changqing's eyes went wide. He shouted for Manshan to let go, then rushed forward and stabbed his sword straight at the tiger's weak spot. Manshan froze, trembling from the pain, then let out an ear-splitting roar that shook the whole mountain. And just like that, the mighty beast collapsed to the ground, completely finished. Everyone stared in shock. One sword strike, and it was over. Magistrate Feng praised Shen for being both smart and strong, calling him a true hero. Shen, of course, acted humble, saying it was all thanks to the magistrate's leadership. Meanwhile, poor Li Chunfeng stood off to the side, muttering to himself that the tiger was supposed to be indestructible. Then he realized, Master must have already known the weak point all along. Holding his nose, he went to pull the sword out, muttering that he finally understood why Master could pierce through the tiger's defenses with just one strike. Suddenly, Shen remembered the sisters and called out in worry. Magistrate Feng reassured him that people had already gone inside to search. Right then, Dong Li and Little Qin came running out, calling for him. Overcome with emotion, they rushed into Shen's arms, thanking him over and over. Shen patted Dong Li's head gently, smiled, and told them it was fine now, they were safe. Dong Li gave him a shy, playful glance and softly echoed his words, "Let's go home." When they returned to Jingyang County, the whole place lit up like a festival. Drums pounded, fireworks went off, and red flags fluttered with the words, "Tiger-slaying hero." The guards proudly carried the massive beast behind them, while people cheered about how Taoist Master Shen had finished the tiger with one strike and saved the county. With a big red flower pinned to his chest, Shen smiled like he owned the place, joking that he'd just become the ruler of the southern region. Then he leaned close to Magistrate Feng and slyly hinted that since he had risked his life for the people, maybe the government should show a little appreciation. When asked what he meant, Shen grinned and suggested that the empty Hong family mansion would make a perfect place for him to live and do business. Magistrate Feng immediately caught on and agreed to gift it to him on behalf of the county. Shen, delighted, threw his arm over Feng's shoulder and promised to write a charm for his house later, laughing happily at how things had turned out. While Shen Changqing and Magistrate Feng were happily talking, Li Chunfeng stood in the back, quietly thinking. He remembered how strange the Hong family mansion felt last time he visited. People said the Hong family was wiped out by the tiger demon, but there were already rumors of family members passing away one after another for years. That didn't add up. Maybe Master already suspected something was wrong with the place and asked about the mansion to keep others from moving in. Lee clenched his fists. He had to go investigate. Soon after, at Ziku Mansion, Shen thanked Magistrate Feng warmly, even promising to invite him for drinks another day. Feng smiled and said he'd always be there to help. Then Shen turned to Dong Li, wondering where Li Chunfeng had run off to. Dong Li explained that he went to check out the Hong Mansion. Shen just grinned, waved it off, and said to let him be. He then called the others over to help him test something out. Meanwhile, Li Chunfeng had already arrived at the Hong Mansion. Standing in the courtyard, he immediately felt it, a heavy, eerie energy wrapping around the place. He muttered to himself that something was definitely wrong. After asking the nearby villagers, he learned the mansion was built right next to an ancient underground tomb. The Hong family had been guarding it for generations. Back when Master was around, he must have used his spiritual energy to suppress it, which is why Li didn't notice anything earlier. But now, the Yin energy was getting stronger, almost ready to take shape. That explained why members of the Hong family kept passing away early. Anyone living here would slowly have their life drained. As he was thinking, the compass on his chest suddenly lit up, glowing brighter and brighter. Li panicked. It was the mystic sky treasure mirror activating on its own. A golden flame-like aura surrounded him, and when he looked up, a huge red eye appeared in the sky, sucking in all the Yin energy. His heart sank. It was the Yin gathering formation of the Black Mountain Old Demon. That demon was using the underground tomb as the center of the formation, and the Hong Mansion just happened to sit right on top of it. Li quickly calculated in his head, things were bad. Master had just finished off one of the demon's generals, and now the real danger was on its way. Back at Shen's small courtyard, things were much more cheerful. Man Shan had already been dealt with, and his hide was hanging on a tree, while the group prepared a big meal. Shen and Little Qing lit the fire, Dong Li poured fresh wine into a steaming pot, and everyone laughed as they got ready to enjoy roast duck with fine wine. None of them noticed the black crow sitting on a branch, its glowing red eyes watching them closely. After a moment, the crow spread its wings and flew off, leaving behind a single feather. It flew all the way to a dark place, where an eerie figure caught it in his hand. This was the Black Mountain Old Demon himself, his body radiating dark energy. He sneered, muttering about the so-called immortal who had just taken down his subordinate, curious to see how powerful this newcomer really was. Back in Shen's courtyard, golden energy shimmered over the wine jar as water dripped into it. A strange power spread out, causing Dong Li to give off an enchanting aura, while Little Qing's body reacted to the energy, making her shiver. Just by breathing in the scent of the wine, they could already feel an overwhelming rush of spiritual energy. Shen waved it off, saying the brew was decent but still not strong enough for his standards. The sisters teased him, asking if he could really make something even better. Meanwhile, outside, the Black Mountain Old Demon was still secretly observing. He frowned, puzzled. Shen looked like a normal man with no trace of magic, so how could Man Shan have been defeated by him? Just then, two young men happened to walk by, chatting loudly about Shen. One of them said Shen was an immortal, and even joked that old Zhao had bought a charm from him and now had the stamina of 10 men, making his wife call him a hero every night. The other laughed and said he wanted one too, so his own fierce wife would stop scolding him. As they were talking, the two suddenly spotted the old man. Thinking he was just another customer, they cheerfully told him there was no need to be shy, and that Shen was approachable. No need to climb the wall to sneak in. Hearing this, the Black Mountain Old Demon's face darkened, but he said nothing. Inside the courtyard, Shen was pouring wine when the two young men barged in, calling out happily that they'd come to buy charms. Shen's eyes lit up, saying he had plenty and asked what kind they wanted. One leaned close and whispered that they wanted the same type old Zhao had bought, praising how effective it was. Shen froze for a second, stunned. 10 times? When did my charms ever do that? He thought to himself. He realized old Zhao must have exaggerated, and if these two bought one and it didn't work, they'd surely come back upset. So Shen explained gently, saying the charms were useful, but not as over the top as the rumors claimed. He advised them to also exercise daily and even mentioned that certain natural remedies, like using parts from strong animals, could help, but he warned them not to push themselves too far. The young men just laughed, saying Shen was too modest. They even pointed outside, saying that everyone in Jingyang County believed in his charms, from kids to elders. They mentioned they'd just seen an old man about to climb the wall for one, but when they turned to point him out, he was gone. Suddenly, a crack of thunder lit up the sky. A voice boomed, asking if they were looking for that old man. The sisters looked up in shock. It wasn't just any elder, it was the Black Mountain Old Demon himself, finally revealing his true identity. The moment Shen looked up and saw the Black Mountain Old Demon standing on his roof with lightning flashing behind him and that creepy crow on his shoulder, he was furious. Instead of being scared, he shouted that his roof tiles had been damaged and demanded compensation. Down below, the townsfolk were frozen in fear. Dong Dong quickly whispered to her sister that no matter what, they had to protect the immortal master. One said she'd stay behind to hold the old demon off while the other took Shin back to the East Sea. But Shin just got angrier hearing this. He scolded the old man even louder, saying things like, "You're already this old and still climbing roofs? Don't think age gives you a free pass. If you break even one more tile, you'll pay for it." The Black Mountain old demon was actually stunned. From what he could see, Shin looked like a regular guy, not even as strong as the two sisters beside him. Yet here he was, completely unafraid and even threatening him. The old demon thought to himself that maybe it was best not to act rashly. Then he raised his voice, accusing Shin of finishing his subordinate demon king. Shin blinked in disbelief. He asked if the old man was talking about the tiger. He couldn't believe it. He laughed, saying the tiger was a reward from the magistrate, so if the old man wanted it back, he'd better pay up. And again, Shin told him to come down before he slipped and embarrassed himself in front of everyone watching. Dong Li tried to warn Shin quietly, telling him this was no ordinary enemy. This was the Black Mountain old demon, a heavenly demon-level being. But instead of backing off, Shin doubled down. He cursed at the old demon, saying he was shameless, and swore he wouldn't let him leave, not even if the Jade Emperor himself came down to intervene. At that moment, Li Chunfeng rushed in, panicked, shouting for his master to be careful. He warned that a heavenly demon had enough power to destroy entire cities. The Black Mountain old demon floated above the courtyard, releasing his aura. Behind him appeared a terrifying Yiksha figure with 2 horns and 8 arms. Smirking, he threatened Shen with all kinds of horrible fates, clearly confident he had the upper hand. Then, with a flash, he dove straight down from the roof at lightning speed, his smile making everyone's skin crawl. The crowd screamed in terror, crying out that it was over, some begging Shen to be careful. Just as panic reached its peak, a thick cloud of smoke suddenly filled the courtyard. Everyone instinctively shielded their faces. When the smoke cleared, everyone was stunned. The Black Mountain old demon staggered out, his body wrecked and barely holding together, his face twisted in fury. He clenched his jaw so hard it looked like he was about to spit fire, his eyes burning with rage. Shin didn't even flinch when he saw the old demon struggling. He stepped forward, saying the old man didn't need to make such a big scene just to apologize, admitting his mistake was enough. Hearing that, the old demon stumbled back, falling to his knees, shocked to find his strength slipping away. From the side, Little Qing, Dong Li, and Li Chunfeng were stunned. Their jaws dropped as they whispered how incredible Shen was. If even the Black Mountain old demon had to kneel, then the immortal master must truly be unstoppable. Shen walked right up to the old demon, holding a manual in his hand. He teased him, saying he had warned him not to climb up on rooftops, but he didn't listen, and now look at the mess. The old demon's face twisted with frustration. Furious, he lunged forward with strange hands, shouting that he'd finish Shen for sure. But Shin just grabbed him with ease, calm as ever, and even went down on one knee to offer him the manual. He said it was a gift, free of charge, out of respect for the elderly, so no need to worry about fixing the roof anymore. When the old demon opened the scroll, instead of a fearsome spell, there was just one giant glowing word, embroidery. That golden light shot straight into his eyes, making him scream. A stream of golden energy flowed through him, and suddenly he coughed out sweet sugar water before collapsing to the ground. Shin jumped back, panicked, insisting he hadn't even touched the guy. He begged everyone to be witnesses, worrying that if the old demon passed out in his home, his family might come looking for trouble. Just then, the townsfolk rushed in. They scolded the old man for snatching characters that were meant for them, calling him shameless for trying to cut in line despite his age. Shin quickly tried to calm them down, reminding everyone to respect their elders and share fairly. He even praised the tradition of Jingyang County for always respecting the old and cherishing the young. At that moment, the little fox spirit marched up and told the Black Mountain old demon he clearly didn't know where he was. Even a heavenly demon couldn't just cause chaos in the immortal master's mansion. The old demon, drenched in sweat, stared at Shin in disbelief, wondering if he really was some hidden immortal. The little fox spirit bowed with respect, saying Shin's true power was beyond anything a mortal could understand. She mocked the old demon, pointing out he was now weaker than even a 3-year-old child. And just as she said that, a toddler waddled over, pulled down his pants, and peed right on the old demon's face before scampering away. The old demon's face turned bright red. He shouted furiously, swearing he was the great Black Mountain immortal, a ruler that even other great demon lords respected. Being humiliated by a tiny child was too much for him, and he roared in anger, vowing to make Jingyang County pay for this shame. Just then, the black crow's red eyes flashed and locked onto Dong Li. When she looked back, her pupils reflected the bird, and strange ripples appeared, like she was being hypnotized. In no time, her eyes turned red, and she collapsed. Little Qing panicked, realizing it was the soul capture technique. The Black Mountain old demon laughed coldly. Even though his powers were sealed, he bragged that he still had tricks left. He threatened Shen, saying he only had two choices, either let him take Dongli as repayment, or risk a battle that could drag all of Jinyang County into chaos. Shen was furious. He snapped at the old man, saying he was crazy and that if it was just about the tiger skin, he could have asked nicely, no need to drag innocent people into this. But Black Mountain just stared at Dongli with a nasty grin, making Shen so angry that smoke practically shot from his nose. He rolled up his sleeves, ready to throw down. Before Shen could act, though, a huge shadow appeared behind the old demon. A voice boomed out, calling him a shameless pervert for daring to have bad intentions toward Dongli. A tall young man with glowing red eyes suddenly rushed forward, grabbed Black Mountain by the head, and punched him so hard he smashed into a wall. The young man shouted for him to get lost. Everyone froze in shock. Shen, stunned but proud, muttered something about how this was truly worthy of being his son. The young man then turned to Dongli, gently helping her up, reassuring her that she was safe now and the creep had been driven away. But before the moment could sink in, little Qing dashed over, snatched her sister from the young man's arms, and fussed over her in a panic, asking what had just happened and if she was okay. Meanwhile, Li Chunfeng and Shen walked toward where the old demon had fallen. Chuanfeng's eyes went wide, whispering that maybe the Black Mountain old demon was finished for good, praising Shen as a hero for saving the people. Shen nearly choked when he heard that. He hurriedly pulled Chunfeng aside, warning him not to talk nonsense unless he wanted them all in trouble. He swore he hadn't finished the guy and begged Chunfeng to keep quiet when the officials showed up. Still nervous, Shen grabbed a tree branch and poked the old demon's face, muttering about maybe finding a doctor. But just then, his own face turned pale, his nose scrunched up, and he groaned in despair, muttering that this time, things were really bad. And that's where this episode wraps up. If you want the next part, let's hit 1,000 likes and 200 comments, and I'll drop the next episode real soon.